Hello there. Displaced people from Ukraine will be supported to make choices about their future while living in Scotland. Following a review of the Scottish Government's super sponsor scheme, which was paused in July, a paper has been published giving details of the work undertaken by the review. It includes 16 interventions aiming to better support people who have fled the war in Ukraine to integrate into communities across Scotland. These measures have a particular emphasis on accommodation, as well as a focus on ensuring people have access to employment, advice, and support. A part of this work, the Minister with Special Responsibility for Refugees from Ukraine, Neil Gray, announced more than 6 million of funding has been allocated to Aberdeen City, for example, from the Ukraine Longer Term Resettlement Fund to enable the council to bring around 500 void properties back into use, making more longer-term accommodation available across the city. The paper also outlines the 7 criteria for reopening the super sponsor scheme, which will remain paused to new applications for the time being, in order to improve its sustainability and ultimately help to better support displaced people from Ukraine now and in the future. The latest published data on the Ukraine sponsorship scheme, including the Scottish Government's super sponsor scheme, was another point there. It shows that since the conflict began, more than 21,000 people with a Scottish sponsor have arrived, representing more than 20% of all UK arrivals. More than 3/4 of these arrivals have come through the super sponsor scheme. On September 22nd, the Scottish Government introduced a new fund with up to £50 million to bring void council and registered social landlord properties into use and to increase available housing supply. In the spring of 2021, the conflict over Ukraine that began in 2013-2014 flared up again. Russia had begun a massive troop deployment on the border with Ukraine, and by February 2022, Russia had successfully massed around 150,000 soldiers and military equipment on the borders around Ukraine. 30,000 Russian soldiers were also stationed in Belarus. And in the meantime, these units have almost completely invaded Ukraine. From numbers, not locally. With the recognition of the separatist areas of Donetsk and Luhansk as independent states and the military offensive in Ukraine, President Vladimir Putin has broken off diplomatic efforts and launched a war of aggression in the country. However, Russia's concern is not just about expanding its influence on security policy in Eastern Europe. Putin wants to re-establish Russia as a great power on an equal footing with the USA and China, or in partnership with China against the West. According to his ideas, the balance of power should be rearranged, with Russia playing a major role in this new structure. Historically speaking, Putin would like to re-establish an internationally influential state entity made up of Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine, based on the former territory of Kiev Rus. In order to achieve this reunification, in order to restore, expand, and secure his Russian empire, he will obviously use any means at his disposal. Putin's fight is also less about new territorial claims per se. Rather, he's fighting against a strengthening of democracy in Ukraine, against the free democratic system of values in the West as a whole, which Russia sees as a threat to the authoritarian regime in Moscow in the form of Ukraine. He is at war with us. He also sees Ukraine as a proxy war between West and Russia. And I'll see you in my next video. I'll be back.